Hey, thanks for coming back, folks. Today we have a little bit later gun than we normally talk about. And for those of you that like watching Don Johnson in Miami Vice, this is a Sonny Crockett leg gun right here. This is a Detonics Combat Master. And it's an interesting little pistol because it does represent mainstream production, well, sort of mainstream production, but production in general of what originally up until that point had been solely a custom gun, the cut down small 1911. So these guns, the patents and whatnot were introduced in 1976, and a company was formed called Detonics 45 Associates up in Seattle, Washington. And up until that point, custom gunsmiths, particularly Armand Swinson down in California, had been taking Colt 1911s and cutting them down to something approximating this size, but they were one-offs. They were, obviously very customized, hand-fitted guns, and the production cost or the cost to the consumer was as high as you imagine it would be for the time. So some engineers working for actually an explosives company up there decided that they would try to put something together, draw something out, and created what became this pistol, and they got some funding and literally actually sold the design. And Detonics 45 Associates was born there in Seattle. And in fact, this gun here, we can see that we're clear there, is marked Detonics 45 Combat Master here on this side of the slide. And then on this side of the slide above the serial number, we have the Detonics 45 Seattle, Washington. So this is the original production. And like most gun companies over time, Detonics went through some changes. It went out and came back, went out and came back, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But what they managed to do with this gun is develop this gun that was a half-inch shorter barrel-wise than the existing Colt Commander at the time. And then they obviously shortened it up here for a 6-round magazine. So there are some parts in here that were new and revolutionary for the time. This coned barrel, bushingless barrel here in production anyway, that is a Detonics thing. And of course it was, now everybody has them, Springfield Armory, Colt, Kimber, everybody does at least one version of a bushingless barrel gun, particularly on the small guns like that. So from 76 through 87, they made the Detonics Combat Master in, I think, 7 different variants. And so it was a Combat Master Roman 1 through Combat Master Roman 7. And those differ basically in the type of finish. They did electroless nickel, they did blue, they did polished blue, and they did stainless steel, which is what this gun is. There were hard chrome guns, there were combination finish guns, there were quite a few of them in 45. And at some point along the way, bigger guns came about, the Score Master, the Comp Master, with the bigger barrel lengths and more features. But typically that was later with another company, with another iteration of the company. So the earliest guns, the very first guns were built on Essex frames, and then they started using Caspian frames at some point. So this would be one of the later Caspian frame guns in the 76 through, still with the 76 through 87 time frame. So only about 17,000 guns were produced during this initial run of these guns. And that may be all guns, but for sure no more than that were produced from the 76 through 87 variant. So they're not particularly abundant out there. You'll find them, you'll run up on them from time to time, but they're not particularly abundant on the market. So there was a bit of a pump in people wanting the guns with the whole Miami Vice connection. But the gun is all steel and it's heavy, and it's I spent a lot of years in law enforcement. I never saw the need to carry a gun on my ankle, but it certainly wouldn't have been that one if I did. It's just too heavy and too bulky for that anyway, for me anyway. So let's talk a little bit about the features of it, and then we'll go into what all is kind of unique about the gun. So obviously we can see it's got the cone barrel. So one of the features that immediately jumps out is this scalloped area right here on the back of the slide. Now unfortunately that pushes the rear sight further forward, making the sight radius even shorter than it would be for such a short slide gun. And of course, Detonics never said it was a target gun anyway, so that's not that big a deal. But the reason for that, there is actually an engineering reason for that. And the thought process at the time was having this scallop right here would make the gun easier, the hammer, single action automatic would make the hammer easier to cock if someone was carrying the gun with a round in the chamber and the hammer down. This gun does not have a Series 80 style firing pin safety. That wasn't a thing when this gun was first produced. So I don't know why anyone would carry a 1911 chamber loaded hammer down, but apparently some people did. The original design, the engineer that drew this up had this hammer spur more vertical to make it even easier to cock. And then when it went into production, there were some changes made that came up with this hammer spur here. So note that there's no grip safety. The area of what would be a grip safety on the gun, this is really just now a frame plug here. So that's not a huge deal. The original design that became the 1911, the 1905 version, didn't have a grip safety anyway. That was a later add-in to the design that became the 1911. And Browning's later design, the P35 or the high power, doesn't have a grip safety either. So I can't tell you how many of these back in the 80s and 90s, not these, but 1911s in general, that we, on competition guns and target guns, we'd pin those grip safeties closed. We don't do that now on defense guns, just from a liability standpoint, but that was a pretty common modification back in the day. So to take this gun apart, oh, one other thing we should talk about also is this magazine, this Detonics marked magazine. It's a 6-round mag, and it has this feature here, this little open area right there. When the gun is fully loaded, the tail of the magazine follower actually protrudes out of this slot in the back. And the thought process there was that that gave you a tactile reference that you had a fully loaded magazine. Now, as soon as the first round's out of it and it's one magazine or one round shy in the magazine, you can no longer feel that. So I don't know that there wouldn't be any way, other than looking in the witness hold, there wouldn't be any way to determine if it was completely empty or if it was just one round shy. So, but that is a design feature of the gun. So taking the gun apart, we don't have a bushing, so it's a little bit different. Some of the Detonics guns had a hole in the guide rod like a Kimber. The easiest way I found to take these apart is just compress this back to the takedown notch, pull the slide stop out, and then it has a captive recoil spring assembly. So this is, and then the barrel just slides out the front. So this is one of the other things that Detonics kind of pioneered on a production gun, is the multiple recoil spring. So this is a duplex recoil spring. There's 2 of them in here. But later guns even had a triplex, had 3 recoil springs. And this is the variant that has the Allen head cap screw, where you can actually disassemble this by removing this Allen head, disassemble this to replace these springs if you wanted to. And if you notice this feature right here, this actually allows the link, when the gun is assembled, the link fits into this to allow the slide to be put back onto the frame. So you notice that these barrels are fitted to the serial number. The serial number appears on the barrel as well. So that was one of the neat things about Detonics. Well, it's one of the things that actually resulted in their downfall. They used very high quality parts, and they were meticulously fitted. So they're very, very well-made guns, which equals expensive, right? So of those 17,000 guns, there were quite a few that were returned to the factory with the complaint of feeding issues. Now, I would believe, I mean, judging from the degree of throat that's on that barrel, gosh, I can't tell you how many GI pattern barrels I've throated over the years, but that's really well done. And judging from the size of the gun and the fact that it's a 45 ACP, I'm almost willing to bet that the vast majority of the feeding problems encountered was shooter error from allowing the gun to move too much in recoil, which is the politically correct way, I guess, of saying they were limp wristing the gun. So, I mean, take it for what it's worth. That's what I believe was happening in the majority of times. I haven't had a Detonics really give me that much problem with feeding as long as you hold the gun correctly and you have a firm grip on the gun, because even with the weight, it does tend to move around a little bit when you shoot it. So from 76 through 87, it was the Detonics 45 Associates in Seattle, and they were struggling. It's an expensive gun to produce. It was an expensive gun on the market. Law enforcement loved it, but law enforcement didn't really love it at the price. So in 87, they were having difficulties and reorganized, and some of the higher up employees in the company bought it and became the new Detonics company, and they moved it to Phoenix, Arizona, and a man by the name of Robbie Barkman, as in Robar, as in, the finish company, the gun finishing company Robar, gun customization company Robar. He was a part of that, the new Detonics company, and they produced this gun as well as some of the bigger gun introductions, and some of the different caliber introductions were done under the new Detonics company from 87 to 92. And they couldn't make it either for the same reasons, keeping the production quality high and therefore the cost high. It was just problematic to keep the gun selling in enough volume to keep the company afloat. So it went away pretty much in 92, and it remained kind of dormant until 2004. And 2004, actually a novelist by the name of Jerry Ahern, and he wrote he wrote a lot of stuff, but what he's probably most associated with is a series of books called The Survivalist, and it was paperback books, and it was one of that type of it hit 27 books in the series. But the hero of that series carried 2 Detonics Scoremaster 45s, and while he was out solving crimes and saving the world and doing all the stuff that he was doing. So he was a big Detonics fan, big gun guy, and he kind of spearheaded revamping the company, if you will, and moved it to Georgia under Detonics USA, and they were making full-size guns, even what was called the Combat Master, which was a $2,000 full IPSC style race gun. And again, high quality, and just still couldn't make it work. And then new owners, in 2007, just a few years later, some new owners got it and moved it to Illinois, and it still didn't work. And now this particular product is defunct today. It doesn't exist. There is a company out there called Detonics. It's a Czechoslovakian-based company. They do produce handguns that are absolutely nothing like this whatsoever. There's no interrelation between the two other than the name. So what would we look for if we're contemplating, or if we run up on a Detonics 45 or Detonics pistol for sale? So the earlier the better. If you can get the original Detonics like this gun here, the Seattle, Washington mark guns, they typically bring a little bit more than the later guns. There are folks that collect all the models in Detonics, and there's enough of a variation out there that it could be a pretty interesting little collection if you put it all together right. So remember, we talk about originality, scarcity, and condition. So with this particular gun, it's all original. There have been no changes to the gun. It'd be hard to make changes to the gun, honestly. There are some pieces that are straight 1911. The thumb safety, for example, the slide stop, are 1911, and those could be changed to Wilson Combat or whoever. But these are as they came from the factory. So of course, refinishing, those are always issues too. So this gun is original. So scarcity, 17,000 guns, relatively scarce. And then condition, and we're pretty happy with the condition of this gun. Actually, it's not beat to death. Nobody's been filing on it, or nobody's been really hurting it. Everything is as it should be. We don't see any excessive burr marks on the slide rails. So that was one thing Detonics did even back then on the stainless guns. The early stainless guns in the AMT series, the hardballer and the various 1911s that AMT put out in stainless steel were notorious for galling. If you have stainless steel of similar alloys rubbing against each other, they tend to gall together, and it just messes up the whole works. Everything gets all frictioned up and rubbed up together. But Detonics did a good job of recognizing that and avoiding that issue. So it's not, to me at least, it's not a known issue with the Detonics guns. But like any other stainless gun, and 1911s in particular, they do like a little bit of lubricant on the slide rails. They like to run just a little bit wet. But the 45 Detonics, kind of a classic gun. I never was a Miami Vice fan myself, but I understand the connection. I understand the thought process about having that there. I don't understand carrying it on an ankle, though. This dang thing is heavy. But the Detonics 45 is, to me anyway, it's an important piece of 1911 history because it pretty much signifies the start of production small 1911 guns like this. If it weren't for the Detonics gun, there wouldn't be a Colt Officers, there wouldn't be a Kimber Ultra Carry, there wouldn't be any of those small 3.5-inch 1911 guns with the coned barrel out there now. It's kind of a Detonics thing that kind of, aside from the custom gunsmiths that were cutting them down back in the 70s, Detonics was the one that kind of led the way with that. So if you're a 1911 fan, the Detonics is, if you can get a hold of a original Detonics specimen, it's a good thing to do. Again, there are 7 variants of the Combat Master itself, and they differ in finishes, and they're going to differ a little bit in how this spring is put together, whether it's 2 springs or 3 springs, or has the Allen head cap screw, or it has the hole in it like the Kimber Ultra Carry does. So there's a few different ways they did that. So there's enough variants to go around to make it a decent gun to collect. So Detonics 45, interesting little gun. Thought it'd be worthwhile to talk about it. If you like what we're doing, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Let us know in the comments that you enjoy what we're doing here. If there's a particular make and model that you want us to try to get a hold of, by all means, we'll do our best to get a hold of one and do something with it if we can. We've had a couple of comments on guns that they made like 9 of, and those are going to be a little bit hard to get, but we'll give it a shot. So once again, thanks for stopping by and spending a little time on the channel. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.